Have you ever noticed how they treat you like you're replaceable? Like all you ever did was breathe beside them. They get so used to the air you give that they think they can find it anywhere. They see you as just a gentle breeze passing through, not the storm that kept them standing. But when you disappear, really disappear, they start to suffocate. Not right away, that would be too merciful. It creeps in slowly, like the hush after a loud bang, and they can't tell if it's regret or madness. That's when it hits them: you were their oxygen. You were the only one who didn't need a mask to breathe around their chaos. But by then, it's too late. That's the whole point. They'll look for you in everyone, in smiles that feel fake, in hugs that don't hold pain, in voices that don't tremble when they say, "I care." But no matter how many people they stand next to, none of them are you. None carry your soul. None feel like you. People love to shout forever in a moment, but moments die the second you blink. You gave them time, energy, patience. You gave your best days even when your own mind was on fire. And they treated it like charity, like you owed them something just for existing next to them. Have you ever seen someone feed a stray dog, then kick it the next day? That's what they did to you. They fed off your loyalty, then broke your spirit once they thought you'd stay anyway. Because you're strong, right? Because you're kind. No. They couldn't handle you. You were too real. Too raw for their polished masks, too deep for their shallow games. So they pushed you away, hoping you'd crawl back. But you didn't. You walked away in silence. And now that silence screams louder than any goodbye ever could. Let me tell you what makes a soul unforgettable. It's not the gifts. It's not the smiles. It's not even the love letters or the laughs. It's the feeling you leave behind when you're gone. It's the empty space that haunts them. It's the conversations they replay at 2 in the morning. It's your name punching their chest when someone else says it. That's what makes them search. That's what makes them scroll through old messages like archaeologists trying to understand what they destroyed. Regret is slow. Have you noticed how they swallow poison every day, mistaking it for nostalgia? But it's not just memories they recraving, something they gave up for someone else, someone they'll never have again. You didn't lose anything. Not a single thing. They lost someone who was ready to carry their storms, calm their demons, and still ask, "Have you eaten today?" You were home, never a hotel or a quick stopover. Yet they treated you like a waiting room, lingering until someone better walked in. Now they wander through glass towers built on lies, searching for a door that feels like you. Spoiler alert, it doesn't exist. And even if it did, it wouldn't open for them anymore. You've changed, and that's what they didn't see coming. Pain is a ruthless sculptor. It carves angels into warriors, burns away softness, and replaces it with a silence so heavy it makes the whole world squirm. Now look at you, you're not louder or more chaotic, just colder, more focused, unbothered. And they can't stand it? Do you think they're happy without you? Do you think that new Joker they grin with even understands the darkness you face just to bring them light? That new person is nothing but noise, a distraction, a temporary fix, an escape. They're using someone else to run from the one memory they can't erase, you. And they're failing miserably. Because behind every "I'm fine" lies a lie. Every smile is stitched together with threads of regret. When they close their eyes at night, they hear your voice not because you were loud, but because you were real. And truth echoes loud in a world full of fakes. Do you know why it hurts so much? Because you were real in a world allergic to authenticity. You loved deeply. You stayed loyal. You showed up in the darkness when it was ugly, when they were broken. And what did you get in return? Silence. Excuses. Betrayal disguised as fake apologies. Here's the twist, they needed you to fall. They needed to break you to feel powerful. But they forgot something crucial: some people don't break, they transform. And that's exactly what you did, not waiting to be seen, but becoming the mirror. Now, when they look at anyone else, they don't see a person. They see a reflection. A failed copy. A constant reminder of what they destroyed. Let that idea sink in. Let that be your power. Because this isn't about revenge. This isn't about payback. This isn't about bitterness. This is about clarity. About knowing your worth so deeply that their absence doesn't feel like loss. It feels like freedom. So keep walking. Keep growing. Keep building yourself quietly. And when they try to come back with the same mouth that once cursed you, just smile. Not out of hate, but out of wisdom. Because now you know. They'll search for you in everyone, but no one will ever come close. You know what truly eats them alive? It's not your silence. It's the fact that you didn't beg. You didn't chase. You didn't post sad quotes, hoping they'd notice. No. You just disappeared. Quietly. Like a ghost with unfinished business. But this time, you were the one haunting them. And the moment they realized you were gone for real. Not just taking space. Not just needing time. But truly gone. Something inside them cracked. Because people like that, they survive on your reactions. They hurt you just to see if you'll stay. They push your limits just to prove they can break you. But when you stop reacting, when your eyes no longer search for them in a crowd, when your heart doesn't skip a beat at their name anymore, that's the moment they feel the loss. That's the moment they realize you were the one keeping it all alive. You were the fire. You were the warmth. You were the soul. And now that you're gone, all they have are cold hands. And colder nights. But guess what? You don't owe them a damn blanket. Let's be real. They didn't fall for you because you were ordinary. They stayed as long as they did because you were rare. You weren't just nice. You were one of a kind. And the thing about rare people? The world either treasures them or takes them for granted, thinking they'll find someone just like you again. But there's no copy of you. No version 2. No upgrade. You weren't limited edition. You were the only edition. The kind of soul that breaks cycles, heals without asking for anything back, and still checks on people who once stabbed you in the back. They thought they could replace you with glitter, thinking it was gold. Big mistake. Because now, every laugh feels forced. Every hug feels empty. Every I love you comes with a pause. Why? Because once someone has felt love soaked in loyalty and pain, they can't go back to fast food love. And what they have now? It's convenient. It's cheap. And it's temporary. But you were art. You were depth. You were pain, survival, and soul. All in one heartbeat. And they let that go. Their loss. Not yours. Let me be real with you. Because I know you still carry those questions. Why did they leave? Why did they change? Why couldn't they love me the way I loved them? The answer is simple. Some people don't want love. They want control. They don't want a partner. They want a puppet. And the moment you started healing, the moment you began choosing yourself, the second you stopped begging for crumbs, they panicked. Because now, guilt didn't work. Silence didn't work. You stopped shrinking just to make them comfortable. You stopped saying sorry just to avoid fights. And in their eyes, that made you the villain. Crazy, isn't it? You gave them light. But they hated you for it. Because your light exposed the darkness they tried to hide. Now they're out there pretending to be happy. Smiling in pictures. Laughing in crowds. But bleeding on the inside. Because no matter how many masks they wear, they still carry your fingerprints on their soul. They still wake up at 3 a.m. hoping to hear your voice. But all they get is silence. A silence they earned. A silence they can't escape. You ever seen someone drop a diamond? Because they thought it was glass. That's what they did. They mishandled you. Because they never learned how to value something priceless. And now they're out there begging the universe to send them someone like you. But the universe doesn't work like that. It sent you once. That was the gift. That was the miracle. Everything after that, just a reminder of what they'll never have again. Because when people lose someone like you, they go through stages. Denial, distraction, replacement, regret. And finally obsession. Not because they want you back, but because they can't understand how they lost something so real, without even realizing it. That's the price of betrayal. It always comes back. Not with revenge, but with silence. With your growth. With your success echoing in the very places they once swore you'd never survive. So what now? Do you shrink back just because they're watching? Do you dim your light to make them feel better? No. You rise. You rise in silence. You become everything they said you couldn't. Not to prove a point, but because you were always meant to. You just forgot for a while. You got caught up trying to save someone who was never really drowning. They were just addicted to attention. And you gave them more than they deserved. But not anymore. Now, it's your time. Not to argue. Not to explain. Just to be. Be the one they remember. When they close their eyes. Be the ache they feel. When no one else understands them. Be the ghost in the room. When their new love asks, "Why are you so distant?" Because you were never the problem. You were the cure. And they spat it out. Now, they're sick. Sick with memories. And there's no medicine for a soul that realizes too late it lost the one thing that could have healed it. They never understood the value of presence until it turned into absence. That's the ugly truth. They didn't appreciate your consistency, your care, your way of noticing the little things they didn't even know mattered. You ever notice how people ignore the parts of you that made them feel safe? Until those parts disappear? Until the world feels colder, Conversations feel empty. And every little moment feels off. But they can't explain why. That's you. You were the detail in a world full of noise. You were the calm in their chaos. The medicine they didn't even know they needed every day. And now they're overdosing on regret. Pretending they're fine. But inside, they're starving. Starving for the attention you gave freely. For the loyalty that never asked for anything back. They thought they had you on a leash. They thought you'd stay no matter what. But you were never a pet. You were a lion. Walking quietly through fire. And the moment you walked away, the whole jungle knew. They lost a king. But don't think for a second they've moved on. They haven't. Moving on isn't about posting a new partner. It's not about laughing louder or partying harder. That's just distraction. Dressed up as happiness. Real healing, real peace? It doesn't come that fast. Especially when you lose someone unforgettable. And you, my friend, you're unforgettable. Not because you tried to be. Not because you forced it. But because you existed. In a way that made people feel seen, heard, and understood. And when you leave, that echo stays. That kind of emptiness. It doesn't get filled. Not with empty words. Not with quick replacements. They can put 10 people in your place. And still feel nothing. Still feel the silence crawling. They feel it crawling up their spine, your absence. No matter how many new arms hold them, it's your missing presence. That keeps them awake at night. That's the curse they gave themselves when they took you for granted. And this isn't about revenge. It's not karma. It's just the natural result of mistreating something real. In a world full of fakes. And you? I know you're still hurting. You carry that wound like armor now. You walk quieter, trust less, love slower. That's what pain does. It rewires you. While they're out there pretending everything's fine, you're quietly rebuilding alone. And that's the part they'll never understand. They broke you, thinking you'd stay broken. But instead, you got stronger. You took your pain, turned it into bricks. And built something they'll never be invited into. That's the power of walking away. You didn't just vanish, you evolved. You didn't just cut them off, you rewrote your story. Now you're not angry, you refocused. Not heartbroken, you re-aware. And that awareness? That's dangerous. Because now you see people for who they really are. Not who they pretend to be. You hear the lies in their voice. Feel the weakness in their silence. And most importantly, you don't chase anymore. You don't explain. You don't beg to be understood. You just move on and let the silence speak. People don't miss you when you're around. They miss you when their new version of happiness fails. When the mask slips. When comfort fades. That's when they start replaying the past like a song they can't stop listening to. That's when they realize it wasn't supposed to end like this. That's when your name becomes a prayer. Whispered into pillows they once mocked you on. The irony? You were never trying to impress them. You were just being yourself. Real, present, committed. And they took that for weakness. Treating it like a flaw. But now they're crawling through memories. Begging their ego to shut up long enough to admit what they really feel. They lost someone irreplaceable. And they'll never find that again. So what do you do now? Do you turn back just because they're hurting? Hell no. You walk faster. You build higher. You speak less. Because you finally learned what love isn't. You finally learned that effort without respect is slavery. That loyalty without boundaries is self-harm. And kindness without reciprocation is abuse. You gave your best to people who wouldn't even give you their bare minimum. Now, you're done. Not bitter, not broken, just done. And that done is the strongest version of yourself they'll ever see, but only from afar. Because they don't have access to you anymore. They don't get to say sorry after the damage is permanent. They don't get to knock on the door they set on fire. All that's left is the echo of your silence, filling the empty rooms where their lies once lived. And that silence is loud. It's real. It hurts. Because now they finally get it. They can search for you in everyone else. But no one will ever compare to you. Here's what really eats them up inside. They always knew who you were. Maybe not at first, but soon enough. They felt it. Every word you spoke. Every time you listened without interrupting. Every moment you showed up when no one else cared to ask. They knew. But they gambled anyway. They thought you'd always be there. Like a song they could play again after chasing the world. Now, the music is gone. Now they sit in silence, surrounded by strangers. Trying to find pieces of you in people who don't even understand your soul. That's what happens when you treat loyalty like a choice. When you treat someone who was ready to burn with you like just another flame to toy with. You were the whole fire. They tried to keep you small like a candle. But some fires don't go out quietly. Some fires leave ashes in the hearts of those who thought they could control them. Want to know why they'll never find peace? Because you were their peace. Not the fake kind you find on vacation. Not the kind hidden behind a smile. But the kind that lives deep in their bones. The kind that understands without words. And they threw that away like it was nothing. Thinking there would always be more. There isn't. You weren't a phase or a season. You were the answer to a prayer they forgot they made. Now when they look at their life, all the drama, the noise, the fake smiles, your absence is the loudest thing in the room. They wear new clothes, take new pictures, laugh with new faces. But nothing fits. Nothing feels real. Because you can't replace someone who held their heart like it was their own. And you did that. You held them up even when you were breaking. You loved even when it hurt. You stayed when you should have walked away. And they spit on the fact that you finally walked away. But here's the beautiful truth, you finally left. You finally realized that staying doesn't prove love. Especially if it means losing yourself along the way. You saw that your worth isn't about how much pain you can endure. Now, you're quietly rebuilding step by step, steady and strong. You stopped fighting for the attention of people who chose to stay blind. You stopped explaining your heart to those who only used it as a stepping stone. And that growth, that rise, it terrifies them. Because the person they knew would have begged, cried, and sent just checking in texts. But the new you? You're unreachable. Not because you're playing games. But because the bridge was burned, and you're not foolish enough to walk back into the smoke. They scroll past your name. Hover over your stories. Reread old messages they promised themselves they'd delete. They laugh in public. But when they're alone, their mind becomes a battlefield. Your face, your voice, your words. They echo louder than anything else. And nothing drowns them out. Because that's what happens when someone loses something real. They try to fill the emptiness with chaos. But it only reminds them of the peace you once brought. No matter how many people they get close to, none of them feel like you. Because you weren't just a person, you were an experience. A lesson. A chapter they thought they could skim through and still understand. But now, the story makes no sense without you. They're stuck, rereading regrets. And the ending never changes. So don't you dare question your impact. Don't ever wonder if you mattered. You did. You still do. The silence you left behind screams louder than words. The light you carried still blinds them when they try to look back. Every step you take forward reminds them of what they'll never have again. That's your revenge, not pettiness, bitterness, or distance. But success, growth, peace. Living like they never existed. While they drown in the memory of someone they never deserved. Let that be your legacy. Let that be the echo. Because even if they scream your name at the top of their lungs, your silence will always be louder. They'll deny it, of course. They'll pretend they're unbothered. Like your absence didn't tear them apart inside. They act like losing you was no big deal, like replacing you was the easiest thing they've ever done. That's the show they put on for the world. But behind closed doors, behind those forced laughs and fake captions, it's chaos. An internal battle. Because the kind of soul you carried isn't something they forget. It stalks them quietly, subtly. In the way certain songs hit differently. In the way some words make them flinch. In the way their heart drops when they see someone who walks like you, talks like you, but isn't you. That slow, creeping ache. That's forever. That's the curse of playing games with someone who was never playing to begin with. You were real in a room full of masks. You showed them light and they chose shadows. Now they're trapped in the darkness they tried to push you into. You gave them a safe place to rest when the world wore them down, a loyal heart. And they called it too much. They called your depth overwhelming, your honesty too intense. Because shallow people drown in deep waters. They couldn't handle the way you saw through them, not just their surface, not just their words, but their soul. You spoke to their wounds. You loved their brokenness without judgment. And that scared them. Because once you've experienced that kind of love, everything else feels empty. But they thought they were clever. Thought they could keep one foot in your world while exploring others. Thought you'd wait forever while they played musical chairs with your loyalty. But now, the music has stopped. The game is over. And they're left standing alone, no chair, no comfort, no you. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you. You've suffered. You've sat in silence, trying to understand how someone could throw away something so pure. You cried in rooms where no one saw. You smiled in public while your heart was bleeding. You gave love like a lifeline and they cut the rope. But still, you didn't become bitter. You didn't become them. And that right there? That's your power. You kept your heart clean even while it broke. You didn't let their poison turn into your personality. You healed not out of revenge, but because you deserve real peace. Peace, the kind that doesn't depend on someone staying. The kind that grows from truly knowing your worth. Even if the whole world missed it, they'll come back around someday. That's how it always goes. Maybe not with words or a message, but with actions. A glance at your story. A friend request. A memory post. A random like. They'll test the waters, see if the door is still open. But what they don't realize is that door isn't just closed. It's gone. You tore it down. You burned the foundation. And rebuilt a version of yourself they'll never get access to again. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself more. That self-love, that silence, that refusal to engage. It hurts them more than any argument ever could. Let them look. Let them search. Let them try to find pieces of you in eyes that don't hold the same fire. In hands that don't heal. In voices that don't calm. They'll fail, again and again. Because you weren't just someone they knew. You were everything they needed. Now every connection they make feels like a poor copy of something they threw away too easily. They'll see a smile and remember how yours lit up when you saw them. They'll hear a joke and remember how you made them laugh when they were too tired to speak. They'll sit across from someone who checks all the boxes but still feel empty. Because love isn't a checklist. It's a presence, a feeling. And that feeling was only yours to give. So walk tall. Carry that silence like a sword. Let them hear your footsteps in their regrets. Let them try to recreate the moments you crafted with a heart they never knew how to hold. Because you weren't just a chapter, you were the whole story. And now that you're gone, the story has fallen apart. Let them sit in that silence. Let them search. Let them ache. Because they'll look for you and everyone else. But no one will ever match you. And here's the cruelest part for them. The longer time passes, the clearer your value becomes. At first, they convince themselves they're fine. They keep moving, keep distracting, keep pretending. But memories don't fade when they're tied to something real. They sharpen. They show up in the quiet. In the spaces between conversations. In the reflections caught in a mirror when they least expect it. That's where you live now. In the pauses, in the unfinished thoughts, in the moments when they'll realize that nothing feels as alive or real as it did when you were around. They'll keep meeting new people, hoping someone talks the way you did. Hoping someone laughs like you. Hugs like you. Understands like you. But they won't find it because people like you don't come in waves. You come in eras. And once your era ends, it's felt forever. They thought they had time. That's always the mistake. They thought you'd wait while they figured things out. While they explored. While they entertained others to see what else was out there. Now they know. They've seen what else the world offers. And it's hollow. It's temporary. It's filled with people who only want to take, never give back. People who show up for the highlight reel but disappear when the credits roll. All they can do now is remember the one soul who stayed through the darkness. The one who stood in the fire with them, not because they had to, but because they chose to. That kind of presence isn't something you forget. It doesn't get buried by time or noise. It lingers like a song that never truly ends. Just fades when the world gets too loud. Have you noticed how tired they look now? How their smile seems forced. Because pretending to be okay is exhausting. Especially when your heart knows exactly what it's missing. They carry you now not in their hands, but in their guilt. And guilt is heavy. It bends the spine. It whispers when no one's watching. That's what they earned, not punishment, not revenge, but awareness. Awareness that they had a miracle and they let it slip away. That they were loved in a way most people only beg for. And they spat on it. Now they walk through life half alive, dragging your shadow behind them like a reminder of the better version of themselves that only existed with you. You were their sanctuary, the calm in their storm. You didn't just offer love, you understood them. You listened to the parts they were ashamed of. You held space for their pain without trying to fix it. And they mistook that softness for weakness. They thought they could do better, that someone else would offer the same depth without asking for the same respect. That's where they lost. Because no one shows up like you did. No one sees the way you saw. Now they're surrounded by people who only touch the surface. When they got used to someone who dove deep, they touched the soul, unlike anyone else. So don't you dare regret walking away. Don't look back wondering if maybe you were too much. You weren't. You were just enough for the right one. But they weren't the right one. They were the lesson, the flame that burned so you could learn not to play with fire that doesn't value your worth. Now that you've risen, stay there. Stay elevated. Stay distant. Let them study the silence you left behind. Let them learn that losing someone real isn't something you just get over, it's something you carry quietly, forever. And that silence will echo through every empty relationship they try to build after you. You became the blueprint. And that's the hardest truth, no matter how many times they try to rewrite the script. The original story, the one where you were the heart, was the only one that ever truly made sense. Let them look, let them search the eyes of everyone they meet, hoping to find that familiar fire. They'll never find it. Because souls like yours don't repeat. They don't come back. They transform and they move on. Now comes the part they never expected, the aftermath, the silence after the storm. They thought the drama would fade, that you'd return like you always did. They thought you'd soften, be ready to forgive just like before. But something changed. Not in them, in you. That final wound wasn't just pain. It was a revelation. You saw them, truly saw them, maybe for the first time. And what you saw was empty. A body with no loyalty. A face with no remorse. Words without weight. That's when it clicked. You weren't healing beside them, you were decaying. You were shrinking so they could feel taller. You were dimming your light so they wouldn't feel exposed. But not anymore. Something inside you snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, irreversible shift. The kind that doesn't come with screaming or slamming doors, but with stillness, clarity. And the kind of peace that only shows up after you've bled for the wrong ones. They felt it the second you stopped reaching out. The second your name stopped showing up in their notifications. The second they realized you weren't watching their stories. Weren't checking their feed. Weren't giving them free space in your mind anymore. That silence was louder than any fight could have been. Because it didn't have to say a word. It didn't scream, "I'm angry." It whispered, "I'm done." And done feels different. Done doesn't chase. Done doesn't explain. Done doesn't wait for closure. Done closes the door and walks away. Those who think they can come back whenever they want, they don't know what to do when done becomes a wall they can't climb. Now they watch quietly from the sidelines of a life they were once front and center in, trying to convince themselves you've changed, that you're cold, distant, different. Of course you are. Pain is an architect that redesigned you into someone unrecognizable to them but very familiar to you. You finally recognize yourself again. You remember the version of you that doesn't settle, doesn't beg, doesn't break for people who wouldn't even bend. You didn't become bitter, you became aware. You became selective. And that's why they'll never get another chance, not because you're spiteful, but because you know better now. You know the cost of loving people who don't love themselves enough to treat others right. They had something pure, something real. And real scares people who live in illusions. You gave them truth in a world built on pretend, and they weren't ready. So they chose comfort over growth, control over connection. Now they're stuck with people who match their dysfunction but can't reach their soul. Your name, your energy, that's the ghost in every room, the echo behind every failed attempt to move on. And it haunts them not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves by showing you who they really are and forcing you to walk away. Let them keep pretending. Let them wear their masks, surround themselves with noise, fill their time with distractions. It doesn't matter. Because when night falls, when the crowd disappears, when the performance ends, that's when the silence returns. And in that silence, you live. In that silence, your memory breathes. In that silence, they remember. And memory doesn't lie. Memory tells the truth that they were loved by someone rare. That they were seen in a way no one else ever saw them. That they were held by hands willing to carry their whole world and they let go. So let the silence do its work. Let the distance be the lesson. Don't text. Don't check. Don't wonder. You did your part. You showed up. You gave everything. And in return, they taught you how to choose yourself. They taught you what you deserve by showing you what you don't. And that's the real power. That's the real revenge. You don't hate them.